Hello, Dr. McLean here, and today I want to talk to you about vitamin D, and which is such a huge factor, especially if you've got autoimmune disorders, if you've got immune system issues, and why so many people are testing low these days, so you're aware of those things and what you can do about it. And this is a huge, huge factor. So a few things, vitamin D is actually not even a vitamin, even though we call it that. It's actually a pre-hormone or a hormone, or some people call it a hormone modulator in the body. And it serves many different purposes. It really affects things like calcium and bone density, but it's a huge factor for our immune system. And this is why it's important if you've got autoimmune disorders or immune system issues. Now we can get vitamin D a few different ways. Number one, we can get it through fatty foods. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. So we can get it through fatty foods, things like fatty fish, butter, cream, raw milk. Cod liver oil is actually a really good source of it. This is one of the reasons they taught it as such a great supplement. And obviously the biggest one I think where most people think of and where probably most people get it from, the majority of, is through the sun and sun exposure. UV light hits our skin and it gets converted. Okay, so those are our sources of vitamin D. So there's some reasons. Well, let's talk about some of the reasons why it could be low or why it's potentially low. Number one is it's been a while now, but we've tested much more commonly for this. Especially medical offices, they didn't test for this, I don't know, 5 or 7 years ago, or at least very infrequently. Now it's tested much more commonly. It's much more popular to test for it. So that could be one of the reasons we just weren't aware of it before, but that doesn't explain necessarily why it's low in the first place. So a lot of different factors for that. Number one is that cholesterol, or the sun, for example, hits the skin and converts cholesterol into that vitamin D. So cholesterol is really the foundation for our hormones. And so if you're taking a cholesterol supplement or if you're eating a really low cholesterol diet, keep in mind cholesterol is not the problem. The cholesterol is natural in our body. We need to have cholesterol. We want to have appropriate levels. I'm not saying that the measurements right now are normal what they should be. They keep lowering those so they can get more people on drugs. But if you've got low levels of cholesterol, you're not going to have the raw sources there to convert it to turn into the vitamin D. So that can be one factor. A big one I think is just we're spending less time outside as we get older and we start to work more in office settings, things like that. We're outside less often. So that's a factor, obviously. And then today we've been taught to really fear the sun, which again, the sun's natural. It's not something that we should fear. We want to be smart about it. But when I can remember as a kid, I'd go out in the summer, you'd get a suntan, and I'm sure I did probably at some point, but I don't remember ever wearing sunscreen as a kid. I probably did at some point, but I don't remember that on a common or regular basis. So number one, we don't get outside as much as kids. We're putting our kids outside. We're slathering them with sunscreen as soon as they get out there. So they're not getting the sun exposure. So if you've got sunscreen on, you're blocking that sunlight. It's not getting converted even if you're out in the sun. Now, I'm not saying you should go out and get sunburned. We want to be smart about how we do that, but we want to get some sun exposure. So just not spending so much time in the sun is a big factor as well. The other thing is digestive-wise. When we get this, the sun exposure, for example, or when we eat this fatty foods or things like that, we get the vitamin D into our body as it can be converted twice. First in the liver, then it has to be converted into the kidneys. So it's an inactive form, and then it's converted first in the liver, then past the kidneys and converted to the active form in the kidneys. So if you've got digestive issues or liver issues or kidney issues, you might be getting adequate levels into your body, but it's not being converted because liver issues or fatty liver, or the liver's just not working the right way. The other thing too is we know that it's a fat soluble vitamin. So bile, which is produced in the liver and stored and concentrated in the gallbladder, is necessary to break down fats and lipids. So if we have bile issues, if you've had your gallbladder removed, or if you've got bile issues, you've got low levels of bile, you might not be, appropriately breaking down this vitamin D as it comes into your body. So there can be a huge number of reasons, but those are some of the big reasons that it could potentially be low levels of vitamin D in your body. Now, one other factor I thought was really interesting that I heard here recently is, as far as a factor being low vitamin D3 or vitamin D, is stress. Okay, now why would that be? Well, we know that stress, when we're stressed, we release cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and cortisol is a steroid hormone, just like vitamin D being a steroid hormone. And the way that hormones work is you have think of a keyhole and a key. So the hormones released in our body goes into a receptor site, kind of like a keyhole, and it unlocks that keyhole, if you will, and allows that hormone to be activated and work in your body. Well, if you think of, if I came to your house and I put a key in your door and I broke off the key, well, now you can't put a key in there. So when we're stressed, when we're constantly releasing these high levels of cortisol, you're filling up these sites with these steroid hormones, and vitamin D3 is also a steroid hormone, is going to compete for these sites. There's less sites available, less keyholes, if you will, available for the vitamin D to be absorbed and activated in our body because we have all these high levels of cortisol. So I thought that was just really interesting. So the one factor I see when you look at autoimmune disorders across the board, when I'm doing all this research, the two big factors I see, and there's a lot of factors, but leaky gut and stress seem to be the two biggest common denominators. No matter what the autoimmune disorder is, for most, the huge majority of people that suffer with these issues, those are the two big factors. So stress is one of the biggest things you can do if you can lower your stress levels. Even if you feel like it's not real high, the lower you can get it, the better. And we can't take away stress most of the time, but we can learn how to adapt to it better. And I'll talk about that in another video. There's so many different things that you can do. As soon as I get that one made, I'll put the link to that video in the description here as well. So we're going to bring our stress levels down. So there's going to be many different factors, but those are some of the reasons that we'd have low vitamin D levels. So if we look at those and reverse that and go, okay, if I've got digestive issues or liver issues or bile issues, what can I do to start to solve that problem? What can I do to get out in the sun a little more, maybe get a few minutes of sun exposure each day? You can actually buy now vitamin D tanning beds, which I thought was pretty cool. I don't own one. They can be a little pricey, but if you can afford that, that might be a great option for you. And then obviously taking supplementation. So let's talk about supplementation for just a minute here. It's changed dramatically in terms of what the recommendations are. We used to be 400 international units per day. Then it went up to 1,200. And now most experts you talk to say anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 international units per day. Most people recommend to get tested. I think that's a good idea, but that's also a snapshot in time. Now, the further you get away from the equator, the harder it is for, you're going to get less direct sunlight, and then depends on your body how well you're absorbing the vitamin D3, just like we talk about some of these factors, and depending on your skin color, how dark or light it is going to affect how much you absorb the vitamin D as well. But we have a lot of patients that have come in the past that have been put on by their medical doctor. They get tested and they've got low vitamin D levels, so they give them a prescription form, which is ergocalciferol. You don't have to remember these names, but just think about it this way. The natural form is cholecalciferol, vitamin D3. The synthetic or fake, if you will, form is vitamin D2, which is ergocalciferol. While the vitamin D3 form, the cholecalciferol, is absorbed 500 times easier, converted in your body 500 times easier than the ergocalciferol. So think about that for just a minute. So imagine if you're given a prescription, 50,000 international units one time per week, that's 500 times harder to absorb. How much of a benefit are you going to get from that versus taking a natural form every single day, which is probably going to be a lot less cost that you can just go get at your natural, wherever your source for your vitamins are. So that's one thing you do want to be a factor of. So such a huge factor if you've got autoimmune issues or immune system issues is this vitamin D. There's a lot of other factors involved, but I just want to touch on the main things with that. So if you have questions on that, please comment here. I'll do my best to try to answer those for you. Or if there's other things you want to learn about this, please let me know. I'll make a video on that as well. And if you like this information, please subscribe to my page, and I'll continue to produce more videos to try to help people with immune system issues and autoimmune disorders.